So I guess in order of the questions, might as well just kind of go in order. I wrote them in order of what I think might make sense. So starting with who both of you are for the sake of the recording and both of your roles in West Windsor Arts.
Great. Do you want to start, Elaine?
Sure. I am Elaine Gutterman,
Mhm.
and I was at the first meeting in 2002 um, that was um, described in um, I think, West Windsor, Plainsboro, the Free newspaper, that people should who were interested in starting an arts center in West Windsor should come to this meeting on the second floor of the well, no, it was in the social hall of the of the firehouse, and it
Okay.
was a musty, um, dark room, and everything started from who came to that meeting.
Mhm. Was that advertisement sent out? Do you know, was it sent out by because it started as this mayor's task force. So was this advertisement put out by the township or was it someone?
It was Paul Cerna, I think. I'm
Okay.
not sure. I'm going to ask around to find out who actually put that notice in the paper.
hmm Yeah, because
Uh,
that's one of my yeah, that was what that it's a subsequent question, but who were the big original figures of the Arts Council? But something like that would be good to know. Yeah.
and I had lived in New York City for many years and gone to arts events in New York City. My husband, who's like a sports fan, describes me as a culture vulture.
Mhm.
I was not an artist at the time. Um, I came to poetry through my contacts um, at the Art Center, taking poetry classes and experiencing poetry by poets firsthand. Um, I was kind of envious of all these visual artists who were part of that initial group and musicians who were interested in developing an art center, but they were also personally artists.
Mhm.
Um, so um, there, there was, um, and it's been a huge part of my life as an adult, and has made me feel like I'm a real part of the community. I've always, from the Arts Center, Arts Council, I've always known people who are really involved in the community, who and the mayor, um, and so it. And I've also learned an enormous amount about how nonprofits run and how people can make a difference in our community.
Okay, great. And I guess Island.
So I'm Aylin Green. I'm the current executive director of the West Windsor Arts Council, and I've been in this role since 2015 when Elane was president of the board at that time and led the search committee and hired me. And I come from a background in fine arts and in nonprofit arts organizations. And so it's really been a great pleasure to be the lead staff person working with the board to make the Arts Council what it is today.
Perfect. I don't know if you hear the phone in my background. If so, I'm gonna. Okay, perfect. Okay. And then I guess you answered the other questions was, what's your personal history with the arts and what brought you both to West Windsor Arts. So I'll kind of skip over to the next one, which is what the importance is of arts specifically in West Windsor, but also more broadly. I know this can be like a 5-hour discussion, but Maybe in a few
Yeah,
sentences.
it could, but it's definitely something that we feel passionately about.
Yeah.
One of the key points, I think, is, how the arts are a connector between people and communities. And I think that was one of the big reasons why the people in the community wanted to create an art center, because they were craving more opportunities for different segments of the community to come together. So that's something that the arts provide. It's a common ground where people can share in their self-expression, and also in enjoying works of art in many different forms, whether that's visual arts or performing arts, there's and a lot of other things in between. It's something that gives us our humanity. It's part of what makes us human, I think. Some people might say it's a nice to have, but we think it's a must have, to be a healthy and engaged community, to really want to live. It's like the reason for living, right? Is
Mhm.
the arts provide that spark that really help us to express who we are, and get to know ourselves. So having an art center, I think, is integral to a community in also helping with that expression as well.
I think um, in the early 2000s, when there was interest in forming an art center, I had children, two daughters in the school system, and I saw what a great job the schools did in terms of engaging our children in arts, and and all the benefits they got individually and group wise from the arts. And I really felt that that was needed among adults in the community.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess then that touches on another question further up. I'll say now, which is what opportunities were there for artists? Sounds like there wasn't many in West Windsor prior to the Arts Council. So if you were an artist in West Windsor prior to 2002, would you have to be going to Princeton to get the kind of a
That was the sentiment. Everyone who was an artist said there we we know about artists in Princeton, and every network of artists was centered in Princeton or in Trenton at Trenton Arts. What's the
Artworks.
artworks?
artworks? Yeah.
Um, and we didn't even know how many artists lived in West Windsor and Plainsboro.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Then Island, I think you touched on something as well, to some extent, which is more, I guess, specific to West Windsor too, but this can also be general discussion. What is West Windsor Arts as an organization, its role in, serving like underserved populations? Because you have the whether or not it be racial or handicapped or whatnot. If you can talk a little bit, or both of you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, yeah, it's really an integral part of our, DNA as an organization to be accessible to as many different people as possible and to provide different access points. So, whether that means, making it easier for someone with a disability to come in and have a great experience, maybe the physical, facility is prepared and ready for that, or programmatically, and also expressing different cultures and, ages. And, there's so many different ways you could look at that question,
Mhm.
but it's all about making access, to the arts easier and more readily available. So that it has always been, a key part of who we are, and has only grown as we've become more able to get grants and other kind of, financial support in order to, just expand that accessibility.
And then for that audience generally, do you find that it's a particular, again, whether or not it be age, race, religion, whatever, demographic that responds a lot to the arts, or is there like a demographic that hasn't responded much, or is it pretty across the board? There's been a
I
lot
mean,
of reception.
we're a very diverse organization. I think when you come to our events, for the most part, they're usually, I mean, there's people of all ages and all backgrounds and abilities, so we definitely, and I noticed that from the beginning when I started there in 2015, going to exhibition receptions, so it is really a wonderful thing to be able to provide that. But it is all a lot about the kinds of programs that you offer as well. So some programs will attract a wide, diverse audience, and that others might attract a more specific audience. But we have different programs for different specific audiences as well, right? And then, but they might be geared towards a specific audience, but that doesn't mean that anyone can attend, right? So they might still be um, open and available to others to come and learn. So, for example, Elane and I were talking about the Golu event that we had these past 2 years in the fall. This is a South Indian festival, which is like a festival of dolls, and they have a very specific way of presenting. It's part of Navratri, and it's celebrated in South India specifically. And so it attracted a large South Indian community, but also was interesting to anyone from the community. And there were, definitely others who were not familiar with those traditions and wanted to learn more about them. So, that's just an example of where an event or a program might be geared towards a certain audience, but it still provides an opportunity for the wider audience to come in and learn and be part of it.
Mhm. And I didn't put this on, this has been making me think, I didn't put this on the list of questions, but has the Arts Council always, or West Windsor Arts always had its classes? Because I know classes are a big part of what you do, or is that more of a comparatively recent development? How long have they been going on?
Well, since the Art Center got the building, that was one of the first programs I think that was implemented, was to have classes in the building. But even before that, they might be more like workshops, or it might be a part of a another event. So one of the big events that they did before the Arts Council building was established was Autumn Arts Afternoon, which was held at the Nassau Park Pavilion over on Route 1, the shopping center there. We're still doing programs there, but
Yeah.
in the early years, those were really important venue because they didn't have an art center. So, but those events would always include some hands-on art making and, learning from artists, maybe doing like a still life drawing or things like that. So there were always like workshop and art class type programmatic things from the beginning, but starting in 2010, the classes on a regular basis at the Art Center was one of the foundational programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then switching it up a bit, still in order, what about West Windsor's relationship with the Berrien City community? Because, my exposure from that was from like the mural
Yeah.
discussion, but I'm sure there's more than that. So how has it been since the beginning? Have there been any evolution, any big moments in the last 25, or I guess 15 years, 16 years,
Yeah.
that are worthy of talking about?
Well, I think it's of note that it is a residential neighborhood, right? So we're a grandfathered, building that's owned by the township, located in a neighborhood. And so, there's like, one restaurant located right next to us, but then otherwise, these are all people's homes. So I think that there's always going to be a little tension, when you have that kind of a situation, because not everyone wants a lot of people coming in and, taking up parking on the road and, a lot of activity and things like that. So I think it's
And concern about noise.
yeah, concern about noise and lights and things like that. So what I will say is that West Windsor Arts has always tried to be the best neighbor who we could. We obviously, are proud of all the activity that we have going on and glad that the community is using this resource. But we've also done our best to maintain good relations with the Berrien City neighborhood, and they have their own community organization or little, communication tree that they set up, and they have meetings from time to time. So we offer them free space for their meetings. So whenever they want to get together, they can use the art center, whereas we rent it out to other groups, because they're sort of our neighbors and, part of our kind of relationship building with them is to make sure that they have access to the space when they want it. And then I'd say other than that, it's really just trying to be a good neighbor in general, and like, we're close with our neighbors right next door. And when the fence needs work or things like that, we just go knock on the door and talk to them or invite them over and make sure we have those contacts and that we can keep communication open.
Mhm. What like one thing that came to mind is the art walk, right? Because you're physically walking through the community as part
Right.
of that.
Right.
When that was first, how long has that event been going on now?
So, I didn't look at the start date on that, but it's several years now. It could be
Okay.
between 3 to 5,
Mhm.
Yeah.
probably five,
So
at least 5.
yeah, okay, because I'm wondering when that originally was planned, was there trepidation on part of the Berrien City community, or did they like embrace it to begin with, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would go door to door and
Mhm.
put a letter in everyone's mailbox, and we still do that, just making sure that they're aware that this is happening, and asking them to let us know if they have a problem with us putting a lawn sign, on the sidewalk there, to help people. And I think there's maybe one person in,
Okay.
the whole route who said, no, please don't do that on my yard. So we just avoid them. But most everyone loves it and is happy to have something going on
Mhm.
in their neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then similarly, I mean, obviously Art Walk's one of them. You have the MLK Day of Service. What are some other major, and I'm sure as you'll say them, they're going to come to my mind, but if there's been any major annual events now, or if there have been major events that you're no longer doing, but were, 10 years ago were a common thing. So like, what are the big annual things, I guess, that Westminster Arts does?
Yeah, we do have a number of annual events, and Elaine and I were talking about how it's sort of been a strategy of ours to cultivate this sort of list of them, and they might grow and change and morph a little bit each year depending on, what we feel is needed, but creating that, ongoing expectation so that people get to know some of the bigger events has definitely been something, a strategy that we've used to keep people engaged. So some of the other big ones, one that we used to have that we no longer have, I mentioned the Autumn Arts Afternoon. That was
Mhm.
always, a big one. And it was really during COVID that we started to see, the a change in attendance and kind of how we wanted to do the event. So now we combine, and we also had a music event. So now we combine the two and we do 3 music and art events at the Nassau Park Pavilion each summer. So rather than just having one huge one, we sort of make it into 3 more kind of manageable ones. And those have great attendance. People love them. They get to hear live music, and then they get to do hands-on art projects. And we always have things for both children and adults. So I would say those have been some long-standing annual events that we're still doing
Mhm.
in different forms. Um, you mentioned the MLK Day of Service. That's been a big one for the past several years. This was our 8th year, actually, doing that event. Um, we've also
How did that get started?
So I was approached by the Human Relations Council who wanted to do an MLK event. And they also were in touch with Latoya Edwards, who was president of the African American Parent Support Group. And so and there was another organization in town called La Convivencia, which,
Mhm.
so, among all of us, we collaborated to create the MLK Day. And it was really more of like a day with speakers and things like that. But we also did a little bit of service projects. And then Latoya and I just realized how much people really appreciated the opportunity to do those service projects, to really feel like they were actively engaged. So we really kind of gravitated more towards that. And I think the Human Relations Council wanted to do the more speaker programmatic type of event, but doing them both in the same small space was a challenge. So Latoya and I just forged on with our day of service, and then we still have the Human Relations Council doing a beautiful event as well with speakers. So that's kind of the evolution of that, yeah, event. Um, Trying to think of what other annual events
I mean, we have the Martian weekend now too, right?
yeah, Martian
And the
weekend.
Martian stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and that was since the 80th anniversary, where we really wanted to bring that back because it was such an interesting piece of history and was related to an arts event. And I thought it was really a great moment, to celebrate and to kind of engage the community. And so that's provided a lot of opportunities for various partnerships, including with the Historical Society, of course, and something that we're still building and kind of morphing and finding new ways to celebrate.
Mercer County Health and Wellness um, Month. And we have the Poetry Out Loud. No, it's not. It's open mouth poetry.
Mhm.
It's There's a donor who was an original board member who now sponsors the event in memory of his wife, whom he met at a poetry event like that in Philadelphia. And because of the healing qualities of self expression, it fits well into the programmatically into being an event for the county's initiative.
Mhm.
Right. Yep.
And now you also have the what is it, the off the wall market too?
Off the wall. Yep. That's been a tradition for going back many years, I think to maybe 2012 or 13,
Mhm.
sort of our end of the year show. That is, everything is pretty affordably priced. There's a lot of work on the walls. And the idea of off the wall is because you can usually, with an exhibition, if you buy something, you have to wait until the exhibition's over before you can take it home. But with this, because the idea was, in gift giving time at the end of the year, you could take it right away and take it home, take it off the wall when you purchase it. So we're still doing that show. Again, that's, seen changes because we were pairing it with an artisan market. And, again, with COVID, there were some changes there. And now we've actually taken the artisan market part of it and made it into a year-round gift store that's in our lobby. So from starting as one little aspect from an event, it's now turned into a year-round opportunity for artisans who make handmade like jewelry and ceramics and scarves and those kinds of more functional
Mhm.
items. So that's kind of a neat progression.
Yeah. And then taking another big left turn, here's the politics question. The because art can be political, right? Even in, I remember in the Martian play last year, there was this there's some politics in that as well. Does the Arts Council have, I guess, guidelines, or how does it determine if something's too political or not? How is that process? Because there's, whether or not it be left, right, or some other kind of dichotomy, it seems semi-unavoidable that artists are going to come in with their own political views, but also the selection process itself is political. So how does West Windsor Arts handle something like that?
So we have typically for our exhibitions, we utilize a juror, so we select a professional from the arts field who will serve as the person who selects the work for a show. And we also have our exhibition committee, who are a group of volunteers who help us come up with the themes for the shows. So what that means is that we have community input in both, determining the thematic angles that are going to be taken, as well as the final selection process. And with that kind of wide community input, I think we're providing an opportunity for people from all different points of view to be involved in the process. And the Arts Council itself doesn't purport to have a specific view, and we don't put forward a specific view. We provide a platform and an opportunity for the community to express their views. And we're pretty explicit about that. Like, we have an artist member page, and there's a statement at the top. It's links to all the different artists, our artist members, who have links to their websites and their work. And it states that that their views are their own, and they don't necessarily indicate the West Windsor Arts Council's views. And we don't have any views as such. We do, obviously it is part of our mission to provide we want to see an equitable world where there's social justice, and we promote these ideals of community and diversity. But we, politically speaking, we don't assign a certain direction there. Yeah. So, especially with local politics, we're very neutral. We're about supporting community and what the community wants and needs. Yeah.
Historical, I mean, the same way at this historical society, we do get outside, I won't be specific, but we do get people saying, oh, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Or why do we do this? Why do we do that? And it to some extent, it's a value judgment, but within the parameters of like a structure and a framework that has justification behind it. So I think that all makes sense. So then going back to, I guess, the history of it, I guess now we can start with the if we can talk a little bit more, Elane, especially about the history of that Mayor's Center Formation Task Force. I know you said you got the that notification in the newspaper. You went to the first meeting. What then? What happened after that point?
I would say that it wasn't the mayor's task force was not as central as is currently portrayed on the website, and that the mayor really wanted to have an art center in the community, and the task force was supportive, but it was really the people who formed the West Windsor Arts Council who made an art center happen. And I know there was one member of Darien City who was Paul Cerna, who was very instrumental, who worked really hard. And I think he was our first board president, who met with the mayor on the task force. But I don't think anybody else went to the task force meetings that I know of. There was one aspect, one development that really changed things for us, was that in 2004, the developer of Nassau Park wanted to expand the shopping center, and they had in there as a requirement earlier to develop to have an ice skating rink for the community
Hmm.
and did not do that. So one board member, Heidi, was on the town council at the time, and she suggested, why not have the DDR pay the art center yearly to do arts events at the shopping center, and um, that would absolve them of their responsibility, and they could then go on and expand. And that is what happened. They agreed to that. They paid us 30,000 at the beginning. It has slowly gone up. Um, and for some of the costs of the events, but not the artists. Initially, they rented um, tents for us. Um, and that was instrumental in the Arts Council building it, developing over time, because it enabled us to hire a part-time executive director.
Mhm. So was the and this is not on the list of questions, was the executive director, is that the first paid position?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And it was initially a board member changed over as um, Jeff Nathanson was previously an art center director in San Francisco. So he became our first part-time executive director. And then Eduardo Garcia was hired when Jeff became executive director of the Princeton Arts Council.
So the first when you said the first person was his name was Jeffrey what again?
Jeff Nathanson.
Nathanson, and he when he became executive director, was that also 2004 or was that a little bit later?
He must have become the part-time executive director around 2004. Whenever we started getting the money,
Okay.
um, I think we would get the money in May. So it's very possible that he became executive director then in
Mhm.
2004 um, or 2005. And um, that made a huge difference. It was someone who could really organize things and do legwork for us.
Mhm. Makes sense.
So I just want to underscore, I think, something that Elane said, which was that the township, because this developer didn't provide a community asset, right? They were supposed to provide a community asset as part of their development of that site. And because they didn't, they supported a community asset.
Mhm.
So, I think it's important to kind of look at the big picture of that, of what happened was, that they we were chosen because we were seen as a community asset. And by supporting us, they were supporting, the community.
Yeah.
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 And providing ways for the community to have some recreation and get together and enrichment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Does the West Windsor Arts utilize the pond back there? Because I know that's that's the space. Is it I know you use the plaza, right?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, is the pond ever utilized in some way?
Not really.
Okay.
No. People,
Okay.
well, sometimes actually, I shouldn't say that. We have had plein air artists go out there and paint
Mhm.
there and bring classes there. So, in that way, yes.
Okay. Okay.
And the kids go to
The
look at
kids,
the turtles.
they do.
Yeah. I did when I was a
One of
kid.
the nice parts is that you can bring very young children to those concerts because they enjoy the open space.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Lane, getting back to something you mentioned, which was that the task force didn't play as central of a role really as the people that ended up making the arts council. Since I was under the impression the task force kind of became the arts council, but it doesn't seem like that. Was there an overlap in the time that like there was a task force and an arts council? Was it separate? How did that timeline work?
Uh, Initially, the mayor formed a task force.
Mhm.
Then we had, after that um, ad appeared in the newspaper, we had a group of people who were meeting and trying to organize. So there was overlap with the task force, and we knew that they were the mayor was into having an art center. So, and at critical time points, they did come through for us,
Mhm.
as in when they participated in negotiating the deal with DDR. Um, but they weren't doing the events that, um, so I wasn't a member of the task force. I don't know of anyone who went to those meetings other than Paul Cerna, but
Mhm.
people did meet with the mayor and discuss things with him,
Got it.
informally.
So this group that became the Arts Council then, how many people were there in the beginning? Was this 5 people that met, 10, 20, roughly?
One, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It was somewhere around 14 or 15 people,
Mhm.
but we had an expression about spouses being voluntold.
Okay.
Um, so it was more. And for different events, we knew about people with interests in those areas. So we rounded up appropriate people. Other people joined, like Eileen Dew, Ruth Potts, Diane Ciccione. Um, we did get new board members. Um, each, there were 2 or 3 year terms. We also had um, guidelines. There's a formal term for it.
Bylaws.
Oh,
Bylaws. Yeah.
bylaws, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they did things really well. That was one of the things that
Mhm.
I was impressed with when I came on board, was how good the initial documentation and materials were coming into a pretty young organization. So it was one of the things that made me feel confident stepping into the role of executive director, that their you know, formalizing documents were in good order.
Yeah, when I joined the Historic Society, I'll say we've come a long way in the last 5 years, and
Yes,
I've
you
gotten a lot of lessons learned and got a lot of familiarization with bylaws and best practices, etc. So that's good to hear. Was it a 501(c)(3) to begin with?
yes. Mhm.
Okay, okay.
yes.
But they
Uh,
had their bylaws, in
Mhm.
place, and they had their, just the documentation organized and together. There was an employee handbook. There were a lot of professional documents, and we've revised them over the years, but
Okay.
there was something there, and they were appropriate for the size of the organization and the age.
Yeah. And Elaine, you were gonna say something?
People had really critical talents. Brenda Engel was an attorney. Um, Paul Cerna had business experience and had a warehouse, so we had places to store things. Um, Dale Roylance was had a position at Princeton University. Heidi Kleinman was an architect. She designed the renovations
Hmm.
that turned the firehouse into an art center. So, and Jeff Nathanson had experience as a director of an art center. So they they volunteered some very important skills.
And I guess that that leads me to the next question was what was the hunt for talking about the Arts Center as a building, what was that hunt for a venue like? Like did that begin in 2002 or was there was it so it seemed okay, it began in the beginning. Yeah.
I believe in the initial years, the fire trucks were still there,
Mhm.
but they were in the process of building the new firehouse.
Yep.
Um, but our hope was always to have the firehouse.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of skepticism among some people that we would never get the firehouse. It wasn't up to code. So in order to use it, it had to be brought up to code. I think asbestos had to come out of the building. Um, we met when we had events at um, the shopping center, but we also had events at schools, the library. When we had events at the library, we couldn't charge, so that was sometimes a problem.
Mhm.
Um, we had a few events at McCaffrey's upstairs. I think we had some board meetings there. We had lots of board meetings in people's houses and places
Market
of
too, right?
business.
You
It
met.
wasn't until 2009 that we started having our board meetings at the town center because we felt that um, they shouldn't be closed. They needed to be in a public space that anyone would feel comfortable coming into. So that
Mhm.
was a change for us. Um, and it was a surprise when the township finally came through and said that they were ready to um, clean up the firehouse, bring it up to code, and give us a lease.
So what was the process then of renovating it? You said Heidi Kleinman, right, was the had an architectural or was an architect and helped out a lot with that. Were there any I guess what were the big challenges associated with that?
Um, we needed money to do the renovations to turn the space into an art center space.
Mhm.
And um, Ruth Potts and her committee raised $250,000
Yeah.
to make that possible. And that was not a simple task. Um, we needed to set up an opening event and lots of classes and events. It was a huge job to go from having maybe board meetings and 20 events per year to having a place that was open 5 or 6 days a week
Mhm.
from um, 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock, and
Mhm.
often in evenings. We had to hire someone to clean. We needed the chairs and tables, and um, we needed to investigate what what was um, what we could afford, but that would be make it a desirable space. Um,
Yeah, I think, you know, just to flesh that out a little bit more, I think also my understanding is that like Heidi created the conceptual drawings, but they did have to hire another architect to create the building drawings. And then they had to work with the township administration, you know, because they owned the building. So it was still very much subject to their processes, but the township really worked diligently with the Arts Council board members in, shepherding that process along and making sure that they worked together and that, things got done. And the Arts Council, I think it was from 2008 to 2010 was about the time period when the construction, I think, really occurred. It opened in 2010. So they started the construction process in 2008. It took 2 years.
Well,
So, but that was, a real collaborative effort between the township administrative personnel and the art center's, board members and other resources that they were able to pull together.
yeah. Oh, in that sense, it is similar to then the Skinnick Farmstead, where it was also a big collaboration between the volunteers and the town to actually get that handyman special into a state where people can tour it.
Right.
And so 2010, it's around the time Island that you join as well. After
no, she
you,
didn't join till 2015.
oh, 2015, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The well then still then 2015, what is the progression of after you, Island, the other staff member that are hired? Like who's next and who's after them?
Well, Kay
They,
was there before me. Kaveri Kalawar was
Mhm.
there already, and she had been in a support position to Eduardo Garcia, the second
Mhm.
part-time executive director. So that's key because she really holds a lot of that history, of the organization and its progression over time, from a staff perspective. And there were other, employees hired along the way. So when I came on, we had Karina Biscayer, who was the education manager,
wasn't she hired by Eduardo
I
much
believe.
earlier?
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
Karina was there
I
as
think
well.
that she started when we opened the art center because
And
one of the biggest, there were two big parts of the program when it opened, the education and the exhibitions.
right, yeah. So Karina was doing the education piece,
Yes.
and I think the board committees were doing exhibitions still at that point, as well as events. There was no
There were
other,
people on the board who were also part of the exhibition committee.
right. So they had some work committees still, and it was still very much a working board. I think it was just the three employees in the beginning, and then they had a couple of part-time people. So when I came on, I was the first full-time executive director, and working with the director of education, and then Kay became the operations director. And so we sort of continued in that vein. And then, once Karina left, we had I think I actually split the role because Karina was also doing rentals and parties in addition to education. So we sort of split off that. So it was rentals, parties, and exhibitions. That's when Kimberly Schimmel, who had been a volunteer with us on the exhibition committee, and so I was able to hire her to do that as a staff person along with the rentals and parties. And then her role has morphed into community events and that kind of thing as well, membership. So right now we're still a very small staff. We have 5 full-time staff members. So we all are wearing a lot of different hats, and I do a lot more programmatic work than probably other executive directors at more mature organizations. But so we're sort of moving in that direction to hopefully expand our development roles so that we can bring on more program staff.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it.
And you've hired people to do the publicity and the website, and there are a number of um, professionals who are now involved doing these different roles, whereas in the beginning it was all volunteers or mostly volunteers.
Right. Yeah, I would say that was one of the big things I did coming in was to find vendors who we could use to fill some of these, needs that we had because, with volunteers, it's not always consistent or timely or, things like that. So, if you need to send a mailing out for the annual fund drive, it's got to go when you need it to go. So, just professionalizing some of that kind of thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I know you've had must have had interns over the years too,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. A lot of interns, a lot of volunteers of all ages.
Mhm.
I mean, Elane and I were talking about how important our volunteers have been and still are to the organization and, having their input and support, in getting things done really has been meaningful to the organization. But it's also created this nice loop that we see where, like, say, someone who was a student maybe became an intern and then was hired in a position, or, went on to do other, interesting things. So that's kind of one of the things that's really neat to see with time is the impact that you have on the individuals who get involved in the organization. Or like, in Elaine's case, who became a published poet, because of her involvement.
Yeah. And you also mentioned the committees. Are there, without, I'm not saying event specific committees, are there more general committees that you used to have but didn't need anymore? I'm sure there was like a buildings committee for, how to deal with the setting up the firehouse to begin with. How have that evolved over time?
So actually, when I started as executive director, I did make a change to the board committees. We did have a few different board committees that did, worked on special projects.
Mhm.
So now what we have is an internal affairs committee, an external affairs committee, and a governance committee.
Okay.
And we also have our executive committee. But those three main board committees, have oversight over specific areas. So, with internal, it's obviously the finances and checking the budgets and the financial reports, but also it could be HR issues or programmatic, needs. So there is some oversight over some of those other internal functions. And then the external affairs used to be like the fundraising committee. So that's still a big part of what they do, run our fundraisers and raise money for the organization. But it's also about being an advocate and just being a connection in the community and attending community events and representing the Arts Council and making those connections out in the community. So that's the external affairs. And then governance is focused specifically on the health of the board and making sure that its processes are all in place and that it has a healthy turnover of board members and new board members are coming in and the officers are being elected and just all that kind of important work.
And the executive committee would be like the president, vice president, et cetera. So
Right.
the other committees in theory, I guess, report to the executive committee, or how does that
Well, they
actually?
report to the board. So
Okay.
at our board meetings, typically a representative from each committee will give an update as to what the committee has been working on and discuss any topics that, the board, they want input from the board about.
Okay, makes sense.
And
And
typically,
then, sorry.
apart from committees, then there might be a task force that
Mhm.
has a specific function and is shorter term.
Mhm.
Right. So task force can be formed and then dissolved depending on
Yeah,
projects.
makes sense. So then I know another kind of big endeavor was that satellite location market fair.
Right.
If you can talk a little bit about that too, like when did it start? How has it gone, et cetera. Yeah.
So I think it was in 2021, we were approached by the management of Market Fair Shopping Center,
Mhm.
inviting us to take a space in the shopping center And they wanted to offer it to us at basically the cost of, I think, the basic utilities for the space. So it wasn't a market rate rent. It was well below market rate, just to cover the cost of keeping the lights on, and a number that they determined, but it was very reasonable. So we decided to give that a try because, we were always feeling kind of the pinch of space at the firehouse. And the way that we, obviously it's like a mall type setting, right? So we had our gallery set up in there, and we had our handmade items. We expanded our handmade items availability, but we also really were interested in holding more classes and workshops in that space because there were these really cool tables, already set up. It was the former burger joint that was in there. So there were these cool tables with stools, and it was a beautiful space. We got a grant from a local energy company to kind of fix it up and make it usable and brand it. And we ran it for about a year, and we sold a lot of art and we sold a lot of handmade goods, but the classes were just not getting off the ground. Like we would, it wasn't as successful as it needed to be in order for us to support the infrastructure, the staffing and that kind of thing that we were paying out. So after a year of doing that, we concluded that the location wasn't amenable to the classes, and so we decided not to renew our lease.
It was also a time of COVID,
Yeah,
which
it was still kind of COVID.
which
Yeah.
probably was part of what impeded it.
Yeah, and I think people just weren't expecting to do a class at the mall, although that has, I think, come along a little bit since then. Like now there's a Pilates place in the mall, and that is starting to, there are these alternative uses for spaces in malls. I think we're seeing more of nationally, not just, in West Windsor. But the malls are suffering. So that was tough for us to be, we didn't have unlimited resources to kind of see if it would come around. It didn't take off right away, and we had to kind of cut our losses on that one. But we
Right.
learned a lot by doing it. We learned, in terms of location, the importance of location, and just what it takes to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what your time schedule is. It is 1:29. I just
Okay.
noticed.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you have time for a few more questions, I do have a few that I prioritize, but if not, that's fine. We can continue it over email, whatever works for you both.
I'm okay for a little bit longer.
Okay, great. Then I'll ask during, yeah, COVID is going to be the next question. All right. So you have that discussion. I assume that like some of the Zoom events that you've had kind of originated during COVID as well.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the key things, being able to pivot a lot of our classes and workshops to Zoom, and offering different, just different events, that allowed people to get together virtually, around art. I think that was really key. And we were one of the first, our fundraiser was supposed to be in March of 2020. And so we already had our art auction through an online software. So we pivoted to doing like a Facebook Live event. And this was literally, I think it was one of the first Facebook Live fundraisers on, anywhere, because I had,
I think I remember that too.
yeah,
Yeah.
other organizations contact me like, how did you do it? And it's like, I don't know, I just did it. We just like, but it worked because we had it already online, right? So people could go online, they could do the silent auction and bid on artwork as well as goods and services. And then, I went on Facebook Live and just said, okay, we're doing this now, and here's why, and thank you for our support. And this is, the good work that we do. And, kept it kind of short and sweet. But, that was pretty much all we needed, because obviously those funds were very important to us, and even more so at that time. So that went well. And then, the other things we did were, our board was really good about supporting me in applying for federal assistance for the
Mhm.
organization. We did have to decrease hours for all of our full-time staff. I think it was like a 20 or 30% reduction in our time and therefore salaries, but not, but we didn't have to lay anyone off. So that was really important to us. We did not want to have to do that.
Well, you couldn't do it and apply for the funds.
That's true. These federal funds were not
Yes.
available to you if you laid anyone off. So we didn't do that. We did cut back and we did get the funds. So that was really key in supporting the organization because we lost a lot of revenue. We are, not being able to, even though we had some virtual classes, it wasn't the same as our usual in-person, you
Yeah.
know, cadre of stuff. So that, and we applied for PPE grants, and I reached out to other funders who had given us grants for projects that we weren't going to be able to do and asked them to turn them into general operating, which they agreed. So that was really helpful. So basically, just like any possibility of support for the organization, we applied for and asked for and got a lot of it. So, and that was, from the work of the staff and the board working together, that we were able to do that and still maintain a presence by offering enough virtual classes and events. So that's how we got through COVID. And actually, I would say in a way, we on the other side of it, it was really good for the organization because we made it through, and our staff was so dedicated and they stuck with us. Then we were able to just get back into it, as soon as possible.
And I'm sure it made you more, I guess, streamlined in some ways, or kind of like trimming the fat in other ways where
Yeah, we
there's that,
streamlined and
yeah.
yeah, exactly. We are
Yeah.
able to maximize that.
Mhm. Makes sense. And also around, well, I guess a little bit more recent is I know there's that name change, right, from West Windsor Arts Council to West Windsor Arts. What was I assume part of that is branding, right? It's always
Yeah,
nice to have a
mostly
shorter name.
branding.
But
I mean,
what?
we still are technically West Windsor Arts Council, right? So there's
Okay.
been no legal change to our entity, but we
Hmm.
used to also use this West Windsor Arts Center name, and that was really more for like the building. But
Hmm.
there was a lot of confusion over which was which or what was the right thing to say. And we found that, I was constantly getting that question. So yeah, the idea was if we just call ourselves West Windsor Arts, and that applies to both the organization and the location,
Okay.
just a way of simplifying and making the branding easier.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I wish the Historical Society, I wish we called ourselves the West Windsor Historical Society to begin with, because everyone else does.
Okay. The
But
Historical Society of West
of West Windsor, right?
Windsor.
And there already is a West Windsor Historical Society in Vermont, so I guess that's why we didn't.
Oh, okay.
That predated us. But still, everyone calls us the West Windsor Historical Society, and it's not. It's not a huge deal, right? But
Well, then
um,
you understand all the issues with calling ourselves WWAC and what does that mean?
mhm.
Right. Right. Yeah. So we use WWA a lot, but sometimes, if it's certain legal documents, contracts, or, dealing with grants, that's West Windsor Arts Council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess the last, this is kind of a multi-part question, is um just generally if you have any memorable like events or artists or contributors, either events or people in the past that you think really need to be highlighted in this discussion.
I was kind of thinking back to some of the exhibitions that we've held where some maybe more well-known artists may have shown their work. And, one of the things I'll say that I think is really cool about West Windsor Arts exhibitions is that we have both emerging as well as established artists who show with us.
Mhm.
And we really are a community-based art center. So it's all about the people who get involved, right? So it's we have some, as I was describing before, even curatorially, like in terms of themes and selections, it's about that community influence. And so, I will say that one of the really satisfying things is to watch it someone who just starts out and maybe has never shown their work before, and then they start showing more and more, and then the next thing you know, they have their own gallery in downtown Princeton or whatever it is, you know. So that's always really satisfying to see. But there have been a few artists who have shown with us who have their own, you know, established careers, and you know, we're very proud to be included in that. One would be, there's an artist, he's a photographer named John Narr, and he's since passed away. But John Narr was part of like Andy Warhol's circle of,
Really?
you know, yeah, artists who in New York. And he's a photographer who has traveled the world and photographed famous people all over the world. And he was part of our Generation Next exhibition, which was a really neat curatorial focus because it was established artists who then invited one up and coming artist to show with them. So also in that show we had Eve Ingalls, who is a, you know, also older now and really, you know, wonderful career, showing artwork, paintings as well as sculpture, and then also pieces that are somewhere in between. Um, so, you know, and then another artist was Ziwan Kong, who is from William Patterson University. He founded the Center for Chinese Art there, and is a celebrated Chinese artist. So he curated a show with us of Chinese artists, um, who are well known, you know, in their own rights. So, you know, there have been these sort of within the art world, you know, it's sometimes not household names, but if you follow the arts, you might come across them.
Mhm.
Michael Reese is another one who's, he shows more in like digital arts. That was part of our, we did a STEAM series where for 4 years we did like science and art, technology and art, engineering and art, and then mathematics and art. And so in each year we had a different focus for the exhibition. So I think he was part of the technology and art show, and that was really a wonderful moment to be able to bring his work in, which was basically an iPad that, you know, when you looked at it, created a virtual reality, you know, using people in the space, and it's really kind of next level. um, so yeah, I mean, there we've definitely shown some bigger names, but we've also shown, you know, artists who that's their first time, you know, ever putting anything on the wall.
Mhm. And Elaine, I guess the same question for you. But this can also be like a contributors, meaning, you know, I kind of knew Dick Snedeker, for example, or like people who contributed a lot. Yeah, I'm sure it's not just him, in the past at a kind of a more local level too. I'm curious about who's kind of been a highlight over the years, in addition to the artist as well.
Um, there's, I was very moved by an event that Diane Ciccone did in the, um, I think in 2010, shortly after we opened. She had the first Black History event at West Windsor Arts, and it was a documentary that she put together that she
Mhm.
filmed. Um, and she was a board member, and it was the integrated, the planned integrated development,
Yeah, Glen
um,
Acres. Yeah.
and when she had past and present interviewed past and present residents from Glen Acres. Um, we've had um, Yamini Pathak, um, is a poet who took classes in Anna Evans' class. She's been our longtime poetry teacher here. Um, and she has gone on to get a master's in fine arts and be a really accomplished poet. And she recently finished a book, a poetry book, not her first. And she we had an event where she read from her poetry and was interviewed by another poet who's taken Anna Evans' class. Um,
And she's a
we've
state
gone
fellow as
from,
well, right? This year, Yamini won a state fellowship award from the
yes,
Jersey State Council.
yes, it was actually celebrating her award. Um, we've gone because of these classes that Anna Evans gives in poetry. There's this very tight knit poetry network centered in West Windsor that's very special.
But Dick Snedeker is a great mention. I mean, he definitely was quite a character and very involved from the beginning. And we still have and still use his sculptures that he made for the Arts Council in our events. At our art walk, we bring out, he has this big plywood sculpture that, gets painted over every year, the kids. And that was his concept, that the kids would paint his sculpture. So we do that. Also, of course, we have to mention Rick Engel, who
Yes.
was Brenda's husband, and he was voluntold. He was one of the ones who were voluntold, but he seems to have really, just really appreciated being a part of West Windsor Arts and helping the organization to continue on. He started out as our anonymous donor, and he would issue a challenge grant to the community to raise a certain amount of money, $10,000, which if we raised 10,000, he would match it with 10,000. And, he would just, increase it every year to now we're up to about 30,000 per year that he matches. And the reason is because he really believes in West Windsor Arts Council as being a central organizing factor in the community and bringing the community together in
Yep.
ways that is really difficult to do otherwise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
By the way, one other artist that came to mind is Eric Schultz with the Scout Ship.
Eric Schultz, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That was a
Mhm.
big event. That was in I wrote down the date. That was in 2018
Mhm.
when we installed the Scout Ship sculpture out in front of the Art Center. And that was really, an exciting time, to get some public art out into the community. It's on our, property, but and have that tie in with the War of the Worlds broadcast too.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all the big questions I had. So thank you both very much. And I know, Aylin, you're recording it, so we'll coordinate on
And
that.
I just want to
Yeah.
end
Yeah.
and say that I think one of the important people for the development of the Art Center has been Aylin.
Mhm.
Um, we've really been fortunate that she decided to join the organization, and she's been here for 10 years, and she's really grown with the organization in her all her vision and capacities and strengths, and it's been a pleasure to work with her, and she's really been vital to where we are now.
Aw, thank you, Elaine. Appreciate
Mhm.
that. It's been my pleasure and honor, you know, as an artist and someone who, has such strong feelings about the value of the arts to be able to use my work life, to support that and to, support a community, and having a strong art center has really been an honor for me. Yeah.
Great. Well, again, thank you both
Well,
again.
Thank
thank
you
you for your
all.
interest in
Yeah.
us.